Have you ever been told that your painting dreams were flat out impossible? That happened to me. I went to an atelier to become a professional fine artist, and the master artist there told me that the expressive brushwork that I wanted to get into my work was just unteachable. I was crushed. I had enrolled in this school because I believed that great painting could be taught and thus be learned. But instead, I was told to just copy this artist's taste, not even look at art outside of what he approved of. And I burned out so badly that I didn't do so much as picking up a pencil, let alone a paintbrush, for an entire year. But here's the twist. That same unteachable brushwork, well, I went on to master it. I created a painting that won the Oil Painters of America Gold Medal, and I had strangers coming up to me saying, "Wow, I can tell you love Sargent." And even one of the Putney painters told me Richard Schmid would be proud of me for this painting that I had made. So as I walk you through this journey in this video today, you'll see two of my own paintings unfolding side by side on screen. The earlier version that felt really stiff and very literal, and then the later version that won the OPA Gold Medal. As you watch, notice how the difference doesn't come down to talent. After all, I'm still the same person. It's the system that I'm about to break down for you. So what changed? Well, I discovered that expressiveness and really getting artistic and painterly in your brushwork, well, that's not about talent or just having some innate vision. It's a system. And today I'm going to break that down for you step by step so that you can bring Sargent's influence and his beautiful brushwork into your paintings too in an original way. To help get you started with immediate next steps so you can start seeing breakthroughs right away, in addition to this video, I put together a mini class that you're going to want to watch after this one. It's free, it's just an hour, and I walk you through in-depth, baby step by baby step, how to build your own Sargent-style composition so you can finally break out of old habits and start creating originals in the style that you've been dreaming of. The link is down in the description. You can go ahead and open it up in another tab or on another device so it's ready for you after you watch this video. I would highly recommend it. Before we talk about each step that I took to change my paintings, we need to set the stage. So when I left that atelier, I honestly thought that maybe the master was right. Maybe even though precision and classical realism is highly teachable, maybe something like expressiveness and brushwork really was some mysterious thing that you're either born with or you're not. That environment combined with the thought burned me out so badly that I didn't make any art for a year. And in that time, I thought my only path was to pivot, to get a regular degree, a regular job. So I went into psychology. And here's where things got interesting, because I still love psychology to this day. And when I started applying the science back to my art journey and my art passion, well, that's when the real breakthrough happened. I realized this actually wasn't a talent problem. It was a systems problem. Of course, I was stuck because I couldn't even visualize my goal. I didn't have a clear picture of what it was that I was working so hard toward when it came to my art. That's why I restarted with clarity, with building a vision of what I actually wanted my artwork to look like. So you'll see that play out in the two paintings on screen. The first one created before I had a clear North Star, and the second one after I built this system that I'm sharing with you. Same subject, but the difference in terms of the brushwork, energy, and just overall life in the painting is night and day. So I went back to Sargent's paintings, and not just his, but other masters that I looked up to. Painters like Anders Zorn, Cecilia Bow, Richard Schmid, Daniel Keyes. And I collected everything that just made me stop and stare. And no, when I say collected, I don't mean that I went out and purchased these pieces. I simply saved those images. And I did this because I realized that it was the first baby step to knowing and truly understanding my goal. I had to be able to see it. So I started with simple admiration. What is the art that I like? But I didn't just stop there. I filtered. So which of these artworks that I love would I actually be excited to be able to paint like? Out of maybe 100 paintings, I cut it down to just 15 to 20. And these became my North Star, my roadmap. And it was the psychology insight that you can't achieve what you can't define that got me there. that turned out to be a pivotal step for me because everything else hinged on it. So in that mini class, I break down this into a full step-by-step guide for you to follow along with, complete with all the prompts that I used over the years to help make this process truly simple. So if you're worried that you'd like too many different kinds of art to choose just one, or you fear that you can't find your singular artistic voice, or maybe you just don't have one, don't skip that video. All right, so I took the time to truly visualize my goal, and that was the change that really got me on the right path. But that isn't the whole story. The next breakthrough actually came from my time as a competitive dancer, and being so blown away by one dancer who improved so much so fast that she took everyone by surprise. For context, the kind of dancing that I was doing, everyone starts at the beginner level. And this dancer, she didn't have any prior dance experience, just like any other beginner in the program. And normally, it takes dancers 1 year to move up each individual level. So most dancers only get to level 4 in their entire college career. And that's so normal that we all just sort of accepted it as a rule of nature. You can only get so good so fast. So when this one dancer started to improve quickly, well, the more senior dancers on the team just shrugged it off. But by the end of 2 years, this one dancer had flown through not 2 levels, but 6 levels. And she was actually beating everyone who had been dancing 2 to 3 times as long as her, including those senior dancers who doubted her in the beginning. How'd she do it? Well, she didn't just show up to lessons. She studied videos of pros performing for hours. She broke their choreography down into bite-sized pieces and practiced those tiny movements relentlessly until they became muscle memory. That built up her foundations and her technique for the basics. But then she zoomed out just a little bit and would practice slightly larger chunks of those same professionals' actual choreography until she was a really great mimic of their material. Then she started to put those individual chunks of choreography together into something that was wholly new and original and her own. Now, the irony here is that in listening to me tell this story, you might be thinking, okay, well, she's just a good copycat. But when she was on the dance floor, the thing coming out of everyone's mouth was, she's a natural. Does that sound familiar? As a dancer, I thought about her story so much because her plan was so simple but so effective. She didn't start out as a natural, but the more she broke the foundations down into bite-sized chunks and mastered them one by one micro movement at a time, the more of a natural she became. It reminded me so much of how people say being artistic is about innate talent or an intrinsic inner voice. And that's when it clicked. I needed to do the same with painting. So I stopped hoping that Sargent's magic would just rub off by osmosis. I broke his paintings down systematically, just like my fellow dancer did. First, I practiced trying to replicate the teeniest aspects of my favorite paintings until I was confident that I could capture a drawing, or mix the right color, or apply a certain kind of brushstroke. Just like this dancer in this story, I wasn't going for the big compositions. I wasn't starting with the entire choreography, and I certainly wasn't starting with trying to make something original. I went back to the smallest, simplest basics, the core technique. And this comes down to simple things like mixing up colors, capturing accurate anatomy, or really having command of the kinds of marks you make on the canvas. Then, just like my fellow dancer rehearsed the top professionals' choreography, I started to follow along with step-by-step instructional videos made by artists who were influenced by Sargent. Painters like Richard Schmidt or Daniel Keyes. I think I bought like every Richard Schmidt and Daniel Keyes tutorial video that existed for sale, whether it was on the internet or whether I was actually getting physical DVDs. And I practiced actually mixing and applying the paint just like they did, step by step through the entire video, start to finish, until by the end of those instructional videos, I had paintings that actually looked like their demos. And then, the more I did this, the more this way of working became more and more like muscle memory. I would create original paintings that were similar enough to theirs that I could easily find myself applying the same sorts of techniques to a composition that was entirely mine and entirely original. And I repeated that process until it simply came naturally in my own paintings. Just like my teammates' choreography notes, suddenly the way to get to my goal it didn't feel like a mystery anymore. It was learnable, exactly the way I wished it had been when I was studying painting at that atelier. So what exactly did I do in the studio to train like a dancer? Well, small focused studies instead of giant leaps. So things like black and white master copies to really master value, zoomed in studies for brushwork, 20-minute brushstroke warm-ups to really force decisiveness so I would stop overworking and getting too bogged down in details. Each exercise was just like a warm-up drill in the dance studio. Just one micro skill at a time, repeated until it truly stuck. And just like in dance, those repetitions compounded fast, which brings me to an essential part of this journey because it goes back to my passion for psychology and understanding how our minds and emotions as human beings work. And that is mindset. As you can probably tell from this video, I have had my share of passions over the years. Painting, psychology, dance, even things like music or learning to do a handstand. And through all of those interests, I've had a lot of teachers. I had an atelier instructor who told us we shouldn't even look at the art that he wasn't showing to us directly. I had the dance teacher who wouldn't bother learning your name until you had been dancing in her studio for at least a year. But I also had the handstand coach who, even though we weren't there to become circus professionals and I was just there to have fun, he had a way of making me want to show up to every single class because it was just that enjoyable. And no, handstands are not inherently rewarding as an activity because after an initial period of improving pretty quickly, like learning to get like your first few handstands, your progress tends to aggressively stall because a handstand is a really difficult skill and building up the strength to get better takes a lot of time and a lot of patience. So what he did was just so impressive to me. I wanted to go back time and time again, despite the fact that this was a really grueling process, that I wasn't getting a lot of intrinsic feedback of seeing big leaps forward in my growth. But nonetheless, I showed up and I improved because of how that teacher was conditioning me to think and to get excited to come to that practice. I took that experience to heart when I started teaching, making sure that I always made it so that my students would want to come back to the studio and trust me with questions or feedback day after day. But this isn't just about my students. I had to do this same thing for myself too, because after that experience in the atelier, I didn't have an art instructor or mentor who was guiding me. I had to do this for myself. And I think that a big part of my breakthrough came down to focusing on small wins, micro moments of improvement that I hadn't experienced before, infinitesimal breakthroughs. I couldn't aim for perfection. I just had to focus on showing up and putting in the work day after day in tiny doses. And that meant instead of holding myself to this standard of my ultimate goal or this standard of perfection, instead, I reframed my attitude and I thought in terms of how can I make this like my handstand practice? How can I make it so that I am so excited to get into the studio every day? And that came down to looking for little wins, looking for moments of progress that I might have overlooked, and really focusing on how I was getting better and not the ways in which I still hadn't achieved what I wanted. And it worked. That's how I went from craving a style that was, quote, unteachable to winning the OPA Gold Medal. Not because of talent, but because I designed my journey with the destination in mind. And if you look at the two paintings we've had side by side this whole time, that's the difference. One is tight and literal. The other breathes. That change didn't come from talent. It came from building a system step by step. So if you take one thing away from this, let it be this. Expressiveness, it's not magic, it's not talent, it's not even innate. It is a system that you can build one skill at a time. If you're ready to start with that first skill so you can stop hoping for a breakthrough and actually create one, join me in that free 1-hour mini class on composing like Sargent. It's where we take everything that I've shared here and map it into a clear system that you can apply in your own studio right away. The link's below. I'm so excited to see you there. I can't wait to hear about your own breakthroughs. So between now and then, happy painting.